I was a storekeeper in a steel factory. I used to work in the basement, so I was responsible for buying everything in the factory, from grinding wheels that were the size of truck tyres to Swarfiga for getting the oil off your fingers, having the overall sent out to be cleaned, all sorts of stuff. That's what I was supposed to do, but I had other ideas, I'm afraid. I personally didn't fancy clocking in and clocking out till I was 65, and I figured that out when I was about 18. So I used to turn up at this miserable place. I mean, it was a shithole, it really was. And, I worked in the basement, there was no natural light. Everything was like, neon or whatever, fluorescent lighting strips. And it was pretty unreal down there. It was just a constant. There was no night, there's no day, there's nothing. There's no wind, there's no rain. Sheffield, industrial, dumpy Sheffield as it was in 1978, especially in a January, February cold winter morning, is not the place to be for me, I'm sorry. And the idea of having seen what the Beach Boys had, as a backdrop for their environment was much more appealing than Upperthorpe, where my factory was. I mean, even the name, Upperthorpe, only in England, That's, it had its plus points, because I wrote the entire lyrics of the first album down there, which was useful, because I used to hide. We'd be doing gigs and stuff, and we were just playing local, like around Sheffield, and I used to go to sleep. We'd not get home till 3 in the morning and have to be at work at 7. And I used to get down there and I'd not had any sleep and fall asleep in the back of the basement on all the dirty overalls, just cover myself up with like rags, and they could never find me. And I had a couple of guys that would cover for me because they thought it was cool that I was in a band. So I got away with murder, but after 4 years of working there, I actually got fired eventually for playing cricket in the basement with a piece of wood and like one of these Bakelite knobs, it's like top of a gear stick that they use for all the machine handles. They wear out quick, and then we would play cricket with them. And I got fired. Well, I got asked to leave, so I did, and then I got a job as a van driver for 8 months, which came in useful because I got to take the van home, and we used to use it for taking all the gear to gigs. And then I got caught in Mansfield. The managing director of the company lived in Mansfield, and we were playing a gig in a pub next to his house, and he saw the van parked outside. So that was me gone from there. But I actually left there when we got our record deal. The original attraction for me was just to get out of that whole environment, but I was first attracted to music when I was 11, when I saw T-Rex on Top of the Pops. That's what did it for me. A little thing went off in here, a little spark. He was a friend of Peter Mensch's through the AC/DC thing. Peter Mensch, who was still our manager, it was in 1979, when he was just about to become our manager, was managing AC/DC. And they'd just done the Highway to Hell album, and they were about to do Back in Black. Unfortunately, Bond died, and that put that back a few months. But Peter brought Mutt to see us playing in Bingley Hall in Stafford. We were opening up for
AC/DC.
Yeah, we were opening up for AC/DC, and Mutt came to see AC/DC, but Peter got him down early enough to come and watch our set, and he liked us, basically. He saw all the faults, but he also saw the potential as well. And with a bit of this and a bit of that, Peter managed to kind of hoodwink him into doing the High and Dry album. When that album came out, none of us had ever been to America. I'd never been on an aeroplane, I wrote the lyrics to Hello America in the basement of this factory I was telling you about earlier, and that was just a kid dreaming. I mean, I had to look up on a map for rhymes for cities, I didn't know anything. All I knew about America was Starsky and Hutch and Kojak. First time we went to the States was May 1980. First gig was on the 20th at Santa Monica Civic.
Actually, you just called me recently and said it's 19 years ago to the day.
Yeah,
on the
20th. It was the 20th of May, the first gig, Santa Monica Civic, which was, to me, was like just, and it was astonishing because I'd got this prized vinyl Bowie bootleg from the Santa Monica Civic in 1972, and the thoughts of standing on the same stage as Bowie in a foreign country was very cool. To me, I mean, it's what it was like. I was just a fan. That's all I was. I was a fan that was wearing a rock star's pair of boots, and they didn't quite fit me properly at the time, You know, I remember when we first went out on stage, we were opening up for Pat Travis in the Civic. And we went, the lights went down, we went on, there's this polite applause. But I remember one person about 7 or 8 rows back screaming out, "Wasted!" which is one of the songs off the first album. I remember turning around to somebody going, "Holy shit, they've heard of us," you know, because I didn't expect them that they had. But they'd been playing that and Rock Brigade on the radio. But America's a different place. I mean, it's just culturally, it's just, you know, rock and roll's part of their furniture. Whereas in Britain, it's a little club that anybody can join, but not many people want to, you know. And they've got, you know, 24-hour rock and roll radio stations, whereas we used to get the Alan Freeman show for 2 hours a week, and Tommy Vance on a Friday night when everybody's in the pub. It's 3 or 4 stations in nearly every town, you know, or at least 2 that play some form of rock music all day, every day. The age of 21, 22 is an astonishingly long time, much more so than it would be now. And we didn't understand why it was taking so long, but we had committed, before we started recording it, to trying to make an album that had never been made before, which meant that we had to go down a lot of avenues and explore them and then turn around and come back because they weren't going to work. We weren't just going to record the songs, we were going to try to create a sound that nobody had ever really managed. And that was going to take a long time to do. By the time we got it finished, we were just so glad that it was done. I don't think we could really see past the end of our noses for a while. But once we'd done the video for Photograph and the video for Rock of Ages, and we started hearing the feedback from America, which is where it happened first, of how much airplay Photograph was getting, then it started to make sense that we had actually made a great record, and that given a bit of good fortune and good timing and hard work, this record could actually make it. I mean, it went like that. We went from, in April, opening up for Billy Squier, to May, headlining, and starting off 2,500 people in a 10,000-seater venue, to within 3 weeks of the gigs being sold out 6 weeks in advance, and we were playing 20,000-seat arenas. I mean, it just went completely, just like a rocket. I mean, it was so fast that we couldn't keep up with it. It actually affected us personally for a while. I think we all lost the plot. We couldn't handle the shoving and pulling of, like, go here, do that, this, that and the other, you know, cameras in your face everywhere you went, people asking for your autograph when you're halfway through eating your breakfast and taking pictures of you while you're eating it. It's like, I just found it astonishingly rude. And I hadn't learnt I don't think any of us had learnt the ability of diplomacy with people that weren't particularly being diplomatic with you, and that takes a while to get used to. But the challenges whilst making that record were just phenomenal. I mean, we did fire the producer because it didn't work out. You know, Mutt had been with us for a while in Ireland writing the songs. He said that he just didn't have the strength to do the album. He'd been on the Cars record, Heartbeat City, for a year, and he was just wiped. He didn't even finish the record, and he just said he wasn't ready to go in the studio again and do it all again. So we sat around and wrote some songs, and we discussed, you know, who we were going to get to produce, and it was astonishing who wouldn't do it, you know. I mean, we'd sold 6 million records, and then all these producers were passing on us. No, I don't want to know. Not interested. I'm like, well, okay. So we were left with not much of a choice anyway, but we went with Jim Steinman, who's not even a producer, really. He's a songwriter. But we figured with his vision of theatrics that it might, you know, we kind of got his theatrics and Def Leppard's dynamics kind of mixed up. I think it was a big mistake on everybody's part. But nevertheless, we went ahead with it for a while, and it wasn't good. And eventually we parted company with him because it just wasn't working out. So we tried doing it on our own, and that was much better, but it still wasn't anywhere near as good as it needed to be. And then, of course, Christmas came along, and Rick had his accident. And, you know, I mean, when you've got all these elements, and there were more to come, you know. I mean, Rick had to recover. He had to go through that whole mental aspect of it, which he'll tell you better than me. And while he's doing that, we're still trying to make a record. And I got the mumps, and then Mutt had a car crash, and, you know, Bon Jovi came out and stole our thunder, and all sorts of things happened, you know. It was a very bizarre time.
Looking back on that whole period, you know, sort of end of '84, it doesn't seem like it really happened to me. You know, it's kind of somebody else, or I don't know. It just seems very distant. But I grew up in many ways. You know, I learned many things about, not only about myself, but about people around me, and their reaction to the whole thing, and just, you know, human nature. And you know, I had a lot of determination to, you know, to get back after that whole thing. I figured it was the only thing I could really do well, and up to that point I'd really started to neglect playing drums, as it were. That was sort of secondary to my extra sort of curricular sort of activities at the time. It was, yeah. But ironically, you know, as soon as I lose my arm, the first thing I think about is wanting to play drums again. And with my determination and them sort of standing by me and just reassuring me that everything was going to be okay, and there was plenty of time, you know, we're going to be working on the album for a while, just do what you've got to do, and you know, we'll be there when you're ready. And it was a special time, although it was extremely painful for everybody involved.
We couldn't have made Euphoria in '96 as much as we may have liked to have done. It just wasn't the right time. A lot of the '90s stuff's been very bland or very dark, and we wanted to make something that wasn't bland and wasn't dark. And after 7 years away from that sound and nobody else is doing it anymore, we almost become the alternative. And it just felt right to make a record where a band like us can re-embrace who we are, not be embarrassed about it, feel good about it, in fact, and write songs and play our instruments, which became very unfashionable in the mid-90s. So to actually be able to write a song wasn't cool. To be able to play your instrument wasn't cool. It all had to be attitude. And I think you can have all three. You know, with this record, it's a classic Def Leppard record, and this is what we're good at doing. And it's a great record. There's some, you know, Slang, there was a lot of individualistic songwriting going on. Very few collaborations. On this record, the whole thing is a collaboration. So it's obviously much more of a collective thing. Vivian's written a lot more on this record than he did on the previous one, and everybody got involved, and we recorded it the way that we've always recorded the classic sounding records in the past, which is a lot of layering, a lot of multi-tracking, a lot of stuff doing it individually, just creating upwards and emphasis on the song, and then whatever needs to happen happens.
This is certainly the first one where it's a real Def Leppard record, where I got to become part of or witness how Def Leppard creates from the ground up, how the whole songwriting mindset. Like Joe said on the last record, Slang was, you know, we didn't really know too much about what we were wanting to do. We just knew we weren't making a Def Leppard record as they had been made in the past, and you know, we all came in individually with songs, and we just sort of basically recorded them, you know, very much in a live manner, and this record was totally different. So for me, I feel it's like my first real experience of what the Def Leppard method is.
I think that this is a very brave record for us to make, more so than Slang was. Slang was deemed a brave record because we jumped off our own bandwagon onto an unknown plateau or whatever. We've actually gone back or moved back into a classic Leppard thing, where a lot of people think that's a very backward move. To us, it's not. It's a very forward move. You know, I think this is a much braver record to make than the last album was. I like the songs. I like the fact that we've actually produced an album that many people think Mutt did, just because he was involved in the first three songs, which is just from an own personal point of view. I think it's nice that we've actually learnt the ability between ourselves and Pete Woodruff to make a record that sounds as big as like the traditional Def Leppard sound, whatever, and do it on our own, which means that we have learnt something, which to me is great, because the learning curve should be a continuous thing. I don't think you ever know enough. In fact, the more you know, the less you know. It's nice to think that you can be making better records the further into your career rather than going downhill. So I love it to death. I think it's great. I think it's perfect for now. It's achieving something greater than what you've achieved before, whether it be a better performance, a better song. Always trying to better what you've done in the past, not living off the past. We don't look back until we're asked about it in interviews. We're always looking what's next, because we've done that and that's it. It's over. So let's move on. What's next? We put a lot of hard work in. As much as a lot of people out there think that rock and roll is just an easy way out, we've worked harder, probably in the last 2 years, when people have been wondering where we are, than we would have done if we'd just been in day jobs for 15, 20 years. But you're working for yourself, so you don't mind. You know, you're not working for the man. You're working for yourself, and you're always prepared to put more hours in if it's your own little baby, you know, and this is ours, this is our thing. And
yeah, the payoff is we're still around after, 20 years.
Yeah.
It's a great time. It's a really good time for us. Everybody seems really settled. We like each other, I think. It's good.
I think we do.